So every time he would, so he did 99 yagyas, and then the 100th yagya, Indra, as we will see, will repeatedly steal the horse in order to prevent the yagya from getting completed. And the highlight of the chapter is Brahma's instruction to Maharaj Prithu, and also very valuable instructions in terms of how should one deal with situations when leaders perform activities that are inappropriate. Okay, so we'll start from verse 13. Atrana chodito hantum prithu putra maharataha anvadhavat shankurdas tishte tichabravit. When the son of King Prithu was informed by Atri of King Indra's trick, he immediately became very angry and followed Indra to kill him, calling, "Wait, wait." So King Atri is, as we know, he's one of the Saptarishis. He appears in this canto, in the first chapter, as one of the descendants of Swayambhavu Manu. So Manu's daughter Devahuti is married to Kardama Rishi. We saw that in the third canto. And they have 9 daughters, one of them being Anasuya. And Anasuya is married to Atri Rishi. Atri himself is direct born son of Brahma. And by the marriage of Atri and Anasuya, then 3 great personalities appear. Soma, the moon god, Dattatreya, who is expansion of Lord Vishnu, and the famous Durvasha Rishi, expansion of Lord Shiva, Soma being the expansion of Lord Brahma. So when Atri saw the activities of Indra, he became very angry. And he informed the son of Prithu, whose name is Vijitsattva. And he actually gets that name later on. But his original name, at least, is not given in the Bhagavatam. But that's the name by which he is addressed, Vijitsattva. So Vijitsattva is described as a Maharathi, as a great warrior. So in the Mahabharata, it is described that amongst the warriors, at the highest is the Maharathis, who can single-handedly face unlimited number of opponents. And then we have the Atirathis, who can fight up to 10,000 warriors. And then we have Yodhas that can fight with other chariot warriors. And then you have Ardha Yodhas, who are considered to be half a warrior. So he's described as Maharathi to indicate that he is capable of chastising and punishing Indra. And Tishta Tishteti Chabravit. So he shouts to Indra, Tishta Tishta. So Tishta Tishta is a form of challenge that is used by Kshatriyas for battle. So literally it means wait, wait, but there is more connotation to it. It basically means wait for battle. And the reason that Vijitsattva says this is because Indra is running away. So as per Kshatriya's code of conduct, firstly, you should never show your back in the battle. And secondly, if somebody has shown the back in the battle, then one should not attack the person. Essentially, one should not attack the person from behind. So because Indra had shown his back, then Vijitsattva, he says, wait, basically turn back and engage in battle. We see in the pastime of Vritasura that when the demons in his army were being slaughtered by the Devas, then they started turning back and running away. And then Vitasur, he chastises them. He chastises both. He chastises the demons, saying that death is going to come in to you anyway, sooner or later. So why are you acting in such a cowardly way by showing your back in battle? And then he chastises the Devas, saying that these demons, they're as good as dead because they've shown their back in battle, but you're attacking them from behind, which means that you're actually worse off than being dead. So that's the Kshatriya code of conduct. And Vijitsava, being a great warrior, he is adhering to it. So Indra does not give any heed to him. So he basically asks Indra to stop, but Indra essentially runs away. Let's see in the next verse, how does he run away? Verse 14. Tam tadrakshitim vikshasya mene dharmam shariranam jatilambha smanachanam tasmai banam namunchati. King Indra was fraudulently dressed as a sannyasi, having knotted his hair on his head and smeared ashes all over his body. Upon seeing such dress, the king of Prithu considered Indra a religious man and pious sannyasi. Therefore, he did not release his arrows. So Indra, in order to make sure that Vijitsava does not attack him, he assumed this form of a sannyasi. So he was dressed in the saffron of a sannyasi. His hair was knotted on his head and ashes smeared on his body. So depending on which sect they are, the sannyasis have ashes on their body. For the Vaishnavas, it's generally the ashes from the yajna. So when they do yajna, the ashes that come, they smear them on the body. And for the more tamasic sannyasis, there could be the ashes from the cemetery. Other sannyasis, they actually smear earth, soil on them. Generally, ashes are considered to be a sign of renunciation, because ash is basically, essentially, it is, there is nothing that you can get from ashes. You cannot get food, you cannot get water, you cannot use it for decoration, to grow. So ashes are smeared on the body to basically indicate the relationship with the material world, that no more relationship, nothing that we can get out of the material world. And then we see that Indra, he is fraudulently dressing as a sannyasi, but still Vijitsava, he refrains from shooting his arrows. Tasmai banam na munchati. Munchati means release the arrows. He was reluctant to shoot, even though he knew that this was Indra. Yeah, verse 15. Vadhanivratam tambhuyo antaveti rachodaya jahi yagyahanam tata mahendram vibudhadanam vidudhadhamam. When Atri Muni saw that the son of King Prithu did not kill Indra, but returned deceived by him, Atri Muni again instructed him to kill the heavenly king, because he thought that Indra had become the lowliest of all demigods due to his impeding the execution of King Prithu's sacrifice. So Vibhuda Adamam, that lowest amongst the lowest. He's saying that he's the lowest amongst the demigods, who Maha Indram. So one of Indra's name is Mahendra, and Mahendra is essentially Maha Indram, which is the great The great Indra has become Vibhu the Adubam. So Atri is in the cosmic hierarchy. He is situated at a higher position than the demigods, because he is a Saptarishi. So higher than the demigods are the Prajapatis. So if you remember the construction of the universe, there is the Urdhva Lokas. So there are the 4 lokas that are above the Svargloka, the Maharloka, Janloka, Taploka, and Satyaloka. The residents of these are considered to be at a higher position, because jivas reach the Svarglok by Karam-kand. And through Gyan or through yoga, they reach the Urdhva Lokas. So they consider the devas just like the devas consider us to be like children. The residents of the higher lokas also, they kind of consider the devas to be passionate and egoistical, not in control of their senses. So we see that Atri here is he's one of the Saptarishis, so he's angry. He's angry at the activities of Indra. So he again instructs Vijitsava that you have to kill Indra. Now Atri did not have anything personal against Indra, but he's seeing that the devas, they're supposed to help in the performance of yagyas. That in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and this is a reference that Prabhupada will make several times in this chapter in his purports, that by this cooperation between the devas and the humans, through the process of yagya, harmony prevails. So the devas are actually supposed to help in the performance of yagya, but Indra is doing the opposite. He's obstructing. And that also, this is a sacrifice that Maharaj Prithu was performing for the pleasure of Lord Vishnu. So when Atri saw that Vijayastava came back without killing Indra, he understood that Indra was deceiving him by his false tracks, and he again instructs him to kill Indra. Next verse. Evam when sutah proktas twaramanam vihayasha anvadravat abhikrudo ravanam gridaradiva. Being thus informed, the grandson of King Vena immediately began to follow Indra, who was fleeing through the sky in great haste. He was angry with him, and he chased him just as the king of vultures chased Ravan. So this is a reference to a pastime in Ramayana, when Ravan had kidnapped Sita and was traveling in the sky on his chariot. Then Jatayu, the king of the vultures, he sees and understands what is happening. So then he begins to follow Ravan. So the analogy also indicates the present adharmic nature of Indra. So Ravan had committed a sin, and Jatayu was following him to punish him for that sin. So similarly, Indra had committed a sin of obstructing the yagya, and Vijitsava was following him to rectify that. Verse 17. So Shvam Rupam Chadattva Tasmantara Rita Swara Viraswa Pashumadaya Pituryakya Upayeyiva. When Indra saw that the son of Prithu was chasing him, he immediately abandoned his false dress and left the horse. Indeed, he disappeared from that very spot. And the son of Maharaj Prithu returned the horse to his father's sacrificial arena. So this gives a little bit of a glimpse into the mentality of Indra. Now we also know that Indra he's a Kshatriya, he's a great warrior. And when the Asuras attack, Indra is at the forefront, and he has fought with some really great demons, Vritasur being the most prominent, but he has fought with many others like Bari Maharaj and the other Asuras that over time have attacked. But he did not want to engage in battle over here, because he knew that whatever he was doing was wrong. It would not be a battle of morality. It's not that Indra was afraid of Vijitsava, because even though Vijitsava is a Maharathi, so is Indra. He's also a Maharathi. But because his mental conception was flawed, he abandoned his chivalry, he abandoned his pride of being a Kshatriya warrior. So even great personalities, when they perform impious activities, the greatness leaves them at that time. So we see that in Indra, that he is cheating, acting like a coward, running away. And the reason is that the activity that he is performing is sinful. He did not suddenly become weak, or he did not suddenly become a coward, but his activity weakened. So more so, Indra is Indra, more so for lesser beings like us. That when we perform pious activities, then all our potencies are fully manifested. When Srila Prabhupada was engaging his disciples in activities, they were performing activities that they themselves did not know that they were capable of. They were going and opening new centers, preaching, singing to large crowds, and new devotees, 6 months, 1 year devotees, and they themselves were not aware that they had this potency. But because they were engaged in the service of the Guru, their potency became fully manifested. And on the flip side, we see that many of the, not many, but there were quite a few disciples, when they fell, then they became completely different. There was a sannyasi in Europe, and considered to be one of the most charismatic sannyasi. He had so many followers in Europe. Almost entire Europe was his disciples across the country, continent. And then something happened, and then he fell. And it was said that earlier on, when he would come to give classes, people would just throng to hear him speak. And now he's still there. He lives in Alachua, but you can see that he's a completely different person now. That charisma, that power, that potency, it just seems to be not there. So we see that in the case of Indra also. Okay. Verse 18. Tattasya chadbhudam karma vichakshaya paramarshayah namadeyam dadustasmai vijitsava iti prabhu. My dear Lord Vidur, when the great sages observed the wonderful prowess of the son of King Prithu, they all agreed to give him the name Vijitashva. Vijitashva. So this is how he got the name Vijitashva. And like as I mentioned, not clear what his name was prior, but this is what he became famous for. So Ashva means horse. Like we have Ashvamedha sacrifice, which is horse sacrifice, and Vijit is winner. So the winner of the horse. Essentially, because he won back the horse from Indra, he got the name as Vijitashva. Verse 19. Upasrajya tamastivram jaharashvam punarhari chashalyuktaschanno chashalyupataschanno hiranyarasanam vibhu. My dear Vidur, Indra, being the king of heaven and very powerful, immediately brought a dense darkness upon the sacrificial arena. Covering the whole scene in this way, he again took away the horse, which was chained with golden shackles near the wooden instrument where the animals were sacrificed. So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this verse that creating darkness in the disguise of a heretic, Channa, he again stole the horse. Then he says, Chashal is a pile of sticks. He stole the horse from the post near the sticks. He stole the horse from the post. He took the horse which was tied with a golden rope, which could not be cut because of its strength, by slipping it over the tip of the post. So Vishwanath Chakravarti gives some additional details that because the horse was tied with a golden rope, which could not be cut, Indra did not break the rope, but he slipped it over the tip of the post. And here he displays one of his opulences, which is he creates dense darkness on the sacrificial arena. And slipping the golden rope over the post, he once again steals the horse. Prabhupada in these verses purports again and again makes the point that one should not consider these sacrifices to be as typical animal sacrifices, which are tamasic. So the animals that are sacrificed in these, they either come out from the fire revived to show that the yagya was performed successfully, or they are immediately elevated to the human form of life. So they are benefited by the process. The sacrifice is not done for the purpose of meat eating. Now about Indra, we see that he definitely has powers and opulence. So one may have powers and opulence and mystic siddhis, but they may not know how best to use them. Right? So Putana, she had immense mystic powers. And she became a beautiful young girl that stole the heart of everybody in Braj. But what did she use her mystic powers? To try and kill Krishna. Similarly, Ravan has so many powers. He changed his form to become a mendicant. Then after he kidnapped Sita, he was traveling in the sky with him. But he was using it for impiety. Nowadays also, we see that people use their opulence to cheat people. And this is the tradition that was started by Indra. So the word Channa also refers to so it is said that Indra created a dark fog. And in the verse it is known as Channa, that Chashala Yupatas Channo. And the dark fog can also refer to the darkness of adharma. So one can also understand this to mean that Indra, by his impious ways, created the dark fog of adharma. Or generalizing it more, when great personalities act in impious ways, then the surrounding becomes covered with irreligion. This is a point that Srila Prabhupada makes quite a few times in his different lectures, purports. Okay, verse 20. Atrihi sandara shayamasha tva ramanam vihayasya kapal katvangadaram vironainam abadata. The great sage Atri once again pointed out to the son of King Prithu that Indra was fleeing through the sky. The great hero, the son of Prithu, chased him again. But when he saw that Indra was carrying in his hand a staff with a skull at the top and was again wearing the dress of a sannyasi, he still chose not to kill him. So Atri, as we know, is upset at Indra for creating irreligion. He wants this farce to stop, and he understands that Indra is in the wrong. So when Indra steals it again, Atri is again angry, and he once again points him out to Vijitashva. Vijitashva, as we can understand, also has mystic powers. Because when Indra is traveling in the sky, Vijitashva is also following him in the sky. But once again, he chooses not to kill him, because he now takes on the form of a different kind of sannyasi. Earlier on, he was dressed in saffron with a top knot and ashes smeared on his body. Now he is carrying a staff with a skull, and again dressed in a form of a sannyasi. So Vijitashva is aware that this personality is Indra and not a sannyasi. But the culture of that time was that even the attire is given respect. This is a sign of culture. In the battle of Mahabharata, when Arjun was fighting with Bhishma, then Bhishma was so powerful that he could just not conquer. He could just not be conquered by Arjun. And then finally, Krishna says that you get Drishtadumna in front of you and then fight with Bhishma. Now, Drishtadumna was a man, and he was in the battlefield. But Bhishma understood that he was Amba, born again. And because he knew that this was a woman, he refused to fire back. So that was the culture, that Bhishma, as a warrior, could not bring himself to fight a woman, even though Drishtadumna was a woman in his previous life. But Bhishma knew him as a woman.
That was Shikandi, Prabhu, isn't it?
Oh yeah, sorry, Shikandi. My apologies. Drishtadumna was the brother of Draupadi, right?
For Dronacharya. He killed Dronacharya, right?
He killed Dronacharya. Yes.
Drishtadumna is elder brother of Shikandi, Prabhuji. He's a brother. They are all children of Draupadi.
That is correct. Shikandi is the elder brother, right? He was born before.
Yeah, I think Shikandi is elder brother, and Drishtadumna and
Drishtadumna and Draupadi were born at the same time.
Yeah, because why I thought Drishtadumna is elder brother is like, because they do not have children. I think that is the reason he performed the yajna. I'm not so sure, Prabhu, the order.
Drishtadumna is younger. Yeah.
Younger, right? Okay.
Drishtadumna is younger. Yeah. So that was the culture that Bhishma as a Kshatriya, because he knew that Shakandi was a woman in his, he knew him as a woman, he did not attack. We see that in the previous chapter, Mother Earth, she took the form of a cow. And even though Prithu Maharaj threatened to shoot her and kill her and feed his citizens meat, it is also understood that he never expected to go through with it. He was basically using it to intimidate Mother Earth into giving the grains that she had hidden. But the fact that she was a woman and in the form of a cow, that was enough protection for her, as she had rightly thought. So we see the same over here, that Vijitashva, he gives respect to the attire. And because of this inherent respect to the attire, people will later on misuse it. And this, of course, is Satya. Even in the current day of Kali, people have respect for attire. That a person comes, now it is not happening in Delhi, but I remember when I was growing up, at least on these days that were like some demigod days, invariably there would be people coming to the house, knocking on the door, and they would be dressed up as whatever corresponding to that day. And we all knew that they were just doing it to give money, but to get money, but we still gave them money just because they were dressed up in that, and they would say that, Shani Dev will bless you or something like that. They will say. So just respect for the external attire of the person. Verse 21, sorry. Okay, and after that we'll pause if there is any discussion. Atrina chodhitastasmai sandade vishikam rusha so swam rupam chataditva tasthavantarita swarat. When the great sage Atri again gave directions, the son of King Prithu became very angry and placed an arrow on his bow. Upon seeing this, King Indra immediately abandoned the false dress of a sannyasi and, giving up the horse, made himself invisible. So we see that that sage Atri, by his mystic powers, is able to see what Vijitashva is not able to see, which is the movement of King Indra in the air. So when Indra had stolen the horse and Vijitashva was following him, and then he saw that he was dressed as a sannyasi, then he did not attack Indra. So taking advantage of that, Indra again disappeared. But sage Atri, he once again spotted Indra, and then he gave directions to Vijitashva that there, he is over there. And Atri has been consistently giving instructions to the son of Prithu that kill Indra. So now we see that Vijitashva, he becomes very angry. Rusha, with great anger, he puts his arrow on his bow and aims it at Indra. Indra, seeing that battle was inevitable, he abandons the false dress of the sannyasi, gives up the horse, and disappears. So once again, we see Indra running away from battle. So all kinds of things he's doing. He's stealing, he's misdirecting, he's acting like a coward, all because of his contaminated consciousness, which in turn is rooted in his false ego. Okay, let me pause here and see any discussion that we have.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. One question, Prabhuji, or maybe little more guidance or explanation. Like generally, we almost, in throughout Bhagavatam or even in other scriptures also, whenever the topic of Indra comes, we mostly hear about his wrongdoings. So, but if we see in one perspective, like, we are very limited and we ourselves carrying so many faults, like, and how much of glorification of Indra is actually described in Puranas, Prabhuji? Like, and because unless we have this much respect and little bit finding fault is okay, but we always hear the other side.
It's true. Indra is, Indra is glorified also. Like we see in the pastime of the appearance of Vamandev. Vamandev accepts Indra as his elder brother. We see Indra and Diti pastime, where Indra is, he cuts the embryo of Diti, but then he takes the progeny, makes them the Maruts. There are a couple of ways to understand this. Example of Indra is given to show the fallibility of great people. Indra is more fallible than others because he acquires his position through fruitive activities. All the activities do not belong to the same Indra. So they are performed by different Indras at different points of time, right? It's like if you say that the president of the US did this and that and that and that and ordered the nuclear bombs to be dropped and etc., then you'll say this president of the US is really messed up, right? But actually there are different people sitting at different points of time doing that. In terms of glorification, I don't know about the Puranas, but the Rig Veda is almost entirely glorification of Indra. So there, the verses are glorifying him at the same level as Lord Vishnu. So he's considered to be the creator, maintainer, and the destroyer, the source of all the life. So same kind of verbiage that we are used to applying to Lord Vishnu, we see the verses applied to Indra in the Rig Veda. In Sam Veda, the hymns that are Sam Veda is essentially glorification, and predominantly of Indra and Surya. They are predominant glorification. That's why people. So sometimes we say that why isn't Krishna more prominently worshipped? Right? Because Krishna barely appears in the Vedas. In all the 4 Vedas, there is very little reference to Krishna. In the Upanishads, there is mention of Krishna as Brahman. Very little mention of Krishna as Vasudev Krishna. There are a handful of Upanishads that Srila Prabhupada would quote from, Gopal Tapani Upanishad, and what are the other Upanishads that you would quote from?
Taittiriya Upanishad, Katha Upanishad.
Taittiriya Upanishad, yeah, Kena Upanishad, these quotes from Kena Upanishad. There are very handful Upanishads that are there. Chaitanya Upanishad is there, but that is mostly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And, but predominantly the Upanishads glorify Brahman, which is why mainstream Hinduism, not many people worship. Because we are fortunate, we read the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. For us, it's Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And we say, who is this Indra? Why is he so great? And what is with Shiva? Why are people after Shiva, right? Because we read the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, and they're all glorifying Krishna. The Upanishads that we read are the few Upanishads that glorify Krishna. But the mainstream, the predominant body of the scriptures, they do not talk about Krishna. The ones that do talk will talk more about Lord Vishnu, and very few of them will actually talk about Vasudev Krishna. So I answered the question a little different, where you were saying about Indra, and I started telling you that about Krishna. But yes, Indra is very predominantly glorified in the at least the Rig and Samved. If you read the brief descriptions, they're mostly hymns and glorification of Indra, Surya, Vayu, the five, the Panch Devas, out of which Indra is considered prominent.
Yes, Prabhuji, because there is two reasons why I asked is, one thing is we are very limited, very much bounded by our karma, which is dictate. Of course, it is because of our past activities, but it is controlled by these planets, which are all controlled by him. And we are pretty much, of course, we do not have personal intention of criticizing, but we keep on hearing his criticism rather than glorification. So that's one reason. And another reason is, if somebody we need to tell, an outsider, because general populace also, Indra means, oh yeah, he did that, he did this. They also speak about negative only, most commoners. So there we may need to say a little good about him also. So
Bhakti, I was hearing a lecture by Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj. Hearing in the sense, I was actually attending it. He was giving it in Mayapur. And he said that when people join ISKCON and they begin to chant and they say Surya, Indra, Vayu, they are like servants. And they immediately go to the level of Gokul. After they chant a little bit more, they say that this Vaikuntha Vasi is too much Aishwarya. They're poor guys. All they do is Aishwarya. By the time they're chanting 16 rounds, they are basically dancing with Radha and Krishna in the Rasana. He was 90% humor, he was saying, but the point he was making was that in the Nectar of Devotion, one of the offenses to bhakti is to criticize demigods. So we should not criticize them, but when we see these pastimes, and this will come later on, Prabhupada's purport, we should see that when personalities as great as Indra can become fallible, what hope is there for us? So that's why these pastimes are put there, not because we say that we are better than Indra, or Indra was stealing stuff, we haven't stolen stuff so far, so we're better than Indra. We shouldn't think like that. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, just to add more on Indra, and even in the Ramayana, he did very nasty, sorry, I'm using the word nasty, he needs to teach us a lesson, and about this, when this Rishi Muni, he went for his morning ablation, he came disguised in the house, and then he was, the lady was cursed to become a stone. I forget her name.
Ahilya.
Ahilya,
yeah.
Same thing there.
Yeah. Gautam Rishi. Yeah, he does get into trouble. Okay.
Yeah, but as you rightly pointed out, I think the way we should look at it is how fallible we are. If he at this level he is doing like that, and we little thing we are doing, we're already like very proud, and it's crazy. That means we will fall even,
That is true. That is true. Yeah. One has to lead a perfect, in one of the Puranas it is said, I think it is in the Agni Purana, it is said that one has to live a life free of sin for 100 births to take the position of Indra. So very exalted position. He lives for the duration of Manu. Right? He lives for 72 Divya Yugas. 71 Divya Yugas. So obviously very exalted position.
Thank you.
Thank you. So carrying on to verse 22. Viraschasphamupadaya Pitrayajnam Atha Vrajat Tad Avadyam Hare Rupam Jagrur Jnana Durlabha. Then the great hero Vijitashva, the son of King Prithu, again took the horse and returned to his father's sacrificial arena. Since that time, certain men with a poor fund of knowledge have adapted the dress of a false sannyasi. It was King Indra who introduced this. So Maitreya is also upset. So we see how Maitreya is completely laying the blame at King Indra, that as great people do, other people will follow, especially those who are not properly guided. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that foolish people think that because Indra was not killed by Prithu's son, they also cannot be killed. Starting their own sampradaya which propagated ideas to spoil sacrifice, the desire to define the goal of sacrifice as attainment of powers like stealing others' wealth and making the body disappear. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that this is the legacy that this activities of Indra has left behind. That because Indra was not killed by the son of Prithu, even though he was capable of killing it, so people who follow his path think that they are also beyond being punished just by wearing the garb of a mendicant. And then what else they do? They start their upper sampradayas. That they start their deviant sampradayas and do similar activities like Indra, which is spoil sacrifices. Means that conduct sacrifices in whimsical ways and steal other people's wealth. Like Indra was stealing the horse. So steal other people's wealth and then try and get some kind of mystic powers, like making the body disappear. Prabhupada gives an interesting purport over here about the staff that is carried by the sannyasi. I remember we were having this discussion in Chaitanya Bhagavat when we were reading in the Dandabhanga Leela, where Nityananda Prabhu breaks the staff of Mahaprabhu when he was on his way to Jagannath Puri. So Prabhupada says that since time immemorial, the sannyas order has carried the tridanda. Later, Shankaracharya introduced the ekadandi sannyas. A tridandi sannyasi is a Vaishnava sannyasi, and an ekadandi sannyasi is a Mayavadi sannyasi. There are many other types of sannyasis who are not approved by Vedic rituals. A type of pseudo sannyas was introduced by Indra when he tried to hide himself from the attack of Vijitashva, the great son of Prithu. Now there are many different types of sannyasis. Some of them go naked. Some of them carry a skull and a trident, generally known as a kapalika. All of them were introduced under some meaningless circumstances, and those who have a poor fund of knowledge accept these false sannyasis and their pretenses, although they are not bona fide guides to spiritual movements. Later on he says, Vedic literature states that a person who puts Lord Narayan on the level of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma immediately becomes a Pakhandi. As stated in the Puranas, Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahmarudra Didevitaha Samatten samatveneva viksheta sapashandi bhave dhruvam. In Kali Yuga, the Pakhandis are very popular, prominent. However, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has tried to kill all these Pakhandis by introducing this Sankirtan movement. Those who take advantage of the Sankirtan movement of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness will be able to save themselves from the influence of these Pakhandis. So Prabhupada makes this important point that this Ekadanda Sannyas is not authorized. It was whimsically introduced by Sripad Sankaracharya to distinguish them from the original bona fide sannyas ashram where they carry the Tridanda. And Prabhupada doesn't explain here, but other places he explains that Tridanda means can either mean transcending the three modes, or Tridanda means commitment to serve the Lord by body, mind, and word. So there are different interpretations of the Tridanda, but essentially that is what was a symbol of bona fide sannyasis. Verse 23. Yani rupani jagrahe indrahaya jihirshaya tani papasya khandani lingam khanda mihochate. Whatever different forms Indra assumed as a mendicant because of his desire to seize the horse were symbols of atheistic philosophy. So neither Srila Prabhupada nor Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad, they expand on this atheistic philosophy, that which form of Indra resulted in which branch of atheistic philosophy. I was not able to find, but I remember hearing somewhere where the speaker was discussing that when Indra took this form, it resulted in this deviant sect. This form resulted in this deviant sect. Now, superficially, you can understand that when he was traveling with a skull and a staff, there are particular kinds of mendicants who live in cemeteries, and they carry blood in the skull, and they are more tamasic in nature. And then there are the false mendicants who smear ashes on their body, and they do a propaganda of false renunciation. But specifically, which deviant sect came out, that's not discussed, at least by these two acharyas, especially Prabhupada, Vishwanath Chakravarti. Prabhupada instead, in the purport, he talks about the opposite of mendicant. He talks about the bona fide process. So he says that in the Vedic civilization, sannyas was one of the essential items in the varnashram. But the sannyas should be accepted according to the parampara system of the acharyas. That means it should be in a bona fide disciplic successions. And then Prabhupada says that in the present moment, however, so many sannyasis or mendicants have no understanding of God consciousness. Such sannyas was introduced by Indra because of his jealousy of Maharaj Prithu. And what he introduced is again appearing in the age of Kali. Practically none of the sannyasis in this age are bona fide. No one can introduce any new system into the Vedic way of life. If one does out of malice, he is known as a Pashandi or an atheist. Then Prabhupada quotes the Vaishnava Tantra, where he says that Yastru Narayanam Devam Brahmarudra Didevataha Samatveneva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhave Dhruvam. Same verse he quotes in two purports. Previous purport also he quotes the same verse, and this purport also he quotes the same verse, that that one who equates Brahma, Shiva, or demigods to Lord Narayan should be considered to be a Pashandi. That a lot of these deviant sannyasis, they worship in a non-prescribed way Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva or one of the demigods as the Supreme Lord. And in doing so, they destroy themselves and those who follow them. So one should understand that it is not that the bona fide processes do not change, right? We see ourselves that the processes have changed. Over the yugas, the process of our worship has changed. In the Satyuga, it was meditation. Treta, it was austerities. Dwapar, Treta, it was yagya. Dwapar, it was temple worship. Kali Yuga, it is sankirtan, yagya. So the process is changing. We also see that there is again change of process according to Kaldesh Patra. Bhakti Siddhanta asked his disciples to chant 64 rounds, at least the ones who lived in the temple. And Srila Prabhupada, 16 rounds for everyone. Before Srila Prabhupada, women were not allowed on the altar. Srila Prabhupada allowed them. He gave Brahman Diksha. That was not given earlier on. So it's not that bona fide means simply no change. But bona fide means that the change is done by a qualified person and is done in a way that continues to get the support of the sadhu, shastra, and guru. So Prabhupada did not introduce changes whimsically. When he made changes, the changes were done according to this three-way check. And that's why the changes did not in any way mitigate the potency of the process. On the other hand, they increased the potency. Because can you imagine if the standard for initiation in ISKCON continued to be 64 rounds, then not many people would have been able to take initiation, right? 16 rounds take around 2 hours. 64 rounds would have taken 8 hours. So how many people could have set aside 8 hours and taken initiation? So by adjusting the standard, the original purpose of spreading Krishna consciousness was not only preserved but expanded, but at the same time the essence was preserved. That the Yuga Dharma is chanting. I know of a friend of mine, a colleague of mine actually. He's in the Sri Sampradaya, and when he got initiated, his Guru Maharaj gave him, so they chant Om Namo Narayana, that's the mantra. So he got initiated and they do the 4 symbols. So they heat it with fire and they press it, the other 4 symbols. That is the main thing that they do for initiation. And then I asked him, how many rounds do you chant? And he said, my Guru just said that try and chant as much as possible. But there was no number that was prescribed. So he chants once in a while. He will chant some days for 5 minutes, some days for 10 minutes, some days for 20 minutes. But the Yuga Dharma is Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam Kevalam. Not the giving of the symbol. That was a secondary part. Now I don't know enough about them, so it's not me trying to criticize them. But when I was discussing that with that, I was appreciating Srila Prabhupada. That yes, he made the change, but he preserved the essence that one has to chant. Okay, verse 24-25. Evam indra haratyashvam Vainayagya jigam shaya tadkrita vishrasteshu pakhandeshu matirnana dharma ityupadharmeshu nagnaraktapadadishu prayena sajjate brantaya peshaleshu chavagmishu. In this way, King Indra, in order to steal the horse from King Prithu's sacrifice, adopted several orders of sannyas. Some sannyasis go naked and some wear red garments and pass under the name of Kapalika. They are simply symbolic representations of the sinful activities. These so-called sannyasis are very much appreciated by sinful men because they're all godless atheists and very expert in putting forward arguments and reasons to support their case. We must know, however, that they're only passing as adherents of religion and are not so in fact. Unfortunately, bewildered persons accept them as religious, and being attracted to them, they spoil their life. So this verse actually almost reads like a purport of Srila Prabhupada of the deviation that was introduced by Indra and taken by those who are already attracted to sinful activities and use this to get some kind of an approval on their sinful activities. It's like in India in the 70s and 80s, Bhagwan Rajneesh was very, very popular. And one of the reasons that he was very popular was that he was promoting the use of sex to make spiritual advancements. So people who were naturally attracted to these kinds of activities, they said, okay, now we can get a religious stamp on our sinful proclivities. And that's how he got a huge following, which ultimately also deserted him. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the foolish being attracted to the clothing which Indra accepted and later rejected. So even Indra rejected the clothing, but unfortunately, those who are foolish, they became attracted to his accepting the clothing. Then he further says that, and here he gives partial allocation, he says that naked persons refer to the Jains. Wearing red clothes refers to the Buddhists. Adishu, etc. refers to followers of Shiva who carry a skull, and others as well. Upadharma means resembling dharma but not dharma. They speak with superficially charming words, peshaleshu vagmeshu, which are very logical. So Vishwanath Chakravarti identifies two deviants that evolved from these activities of Indra. One are the Jains. So in Jains, we have, and I'm not sure if this evolved after Vishwanath Chakravarti, but now there are two sects in the Jains. There are the Digambars and the Svetambars. And the Svetambars wear dress that is white in color. The Digambars, they are dressed in the sky, by the sky, which means they essentially go naked. But later on also we'll see when we'll talk about the pastimes of Maharaj Rishabdev, then the origin of Jainism actually comes from a king, and he saw the activities of Maharaj Rishabdev and became bewildered by it and concocted something which essentially later on became Jainism. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad said that red cloth refers to Buddhists. They wear red clothes and preach ahimsa, which is pseudo-Vedic. And then other followers are The other followers are examples of Lord Shiva. So Indra, we see that he rejected these false dresses. Similarly, people who take on these false religions, they're also prone to whimsically reject them, because there is no basis. Like when Vaishnavas take over the worship of Krishna, there is reciprocation. That's why that relationship becomes stronger and stronger over time. There are cases when people reject also, they fall down because of various reasons. But because the process is bona fide, as one practices more and more, one becomes more and more enthused. They develop more and more faith. But in the pseudo religion, there is no reciprocation. It's like trying to drink milk from the nipples of a goat. There is no milk over there, which is why these people, they take one, they reject it, they go to something else, they reject it. There's no reciprocation. And so if you kind of step back and think about the third canto, where we were talking about Visarga, the whole material world is mainly created to house the conditioned souls, entirely created to house the conditioned souls. And if you remember that the first thing that Brahma did when he started Visarga was to create the 5 kinds of nations, right? So he created Tamasa, which is forgetfulness of one's identity. Then Moha. Moha means that once you forget your identity, you take a new identity, a false identity. And then there is Mahamoha, which is based on that false identity, you develop possessiveness, that this belongs to me. And then there was Tamashama. Tamashama is that the anger that happens when you try to possess something based on your false identity and are not able to attain it. And there is Antatamashama, which is the final fear of death. That is losing everything. So because of moha, which is forgetting one's identity, and mahamoha, which is the tendency to take on a false identity, conditioned souls, they are very much prone to do that, because it is the basis of the material world. That when the conditioned jivas come in, then they get influenced by moha and mahamoha. Forget who you are and take on a new identity, accepting that which is not, rejecting that which is factual, and accepting that which is not factual. So because of this, the process that is introduced by Indra, it resonates very much with the intrinsic nature of the conditioned soul. This is what Indra is introducing, that you reject your identity and take on a false identity. This is the basis of the material world. Reject your true identity, take a false identity. That is why he has so many followers. Right? If you go to a place where people are habituated to eating meat, if you serve them vegetarian food, they will eat it if they have no other alternative. But as soon as they will see non-vegetarian food, they will leave all vegetarian food and go and run after that, because that's their intrinsic nature. So that is why Indra, not that he was a very powerful preacher or he did a lot of campaigning after that, but he did something that resonated with the conditioned jivas. And that's why they took to it. So dharmatya upadharmeshu, that confusing adharma with dharma, nagna rakta patadishu, that they travel naked, nagna rakta patadishu, they travel naked or in red robes, prayena sajjeta bhrantaya, attracting the foolish person, peshalueshu cha vagmishu, by their eloquence. So they have an easy job. The Vaishnavas have a difficult job because they are fighting against the intrinsic nature of the conditioned soul. Now, the intrinsic nature of the soul is different, but the intrinsic nature of the conditioned soul is to reject your true identity and take on a false identity. So that is why Peshadeshucha Bharmashu, simply by their eloquence, they have to simply stand at a street corner and speak. And they will immediately attract a lot of followers. So Prabhupada says that, as stated in Bhagavatam, men in this age of Kali are short-lived, devoid of spiritual knowledge, and susceptible to false religious systems due to their unfortunate condition. Thus, they always remain mentally disturbed. So he's quoting essentially Manda Sumanda Mataya Manda Bhagya Ayopratita. This comes in the first canto, first chapter of the Bhagavatam, where the sages are bemoaning the situation in the age of Kali. So Prabhupada is translating that verse. He does not quote it directly. And then he says the Vedic Shastras practically prohibit the adoption of sannyas in the age of Kali because less intelligent men may accept the sannyas order for cheating purpose. Now, this is something that we need to understand a little bit because it's clearly said that sannyas is forbidden in the age of Kali. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas. There are many Vaishnava acharyas that have accepted sannyas. Bhakti Siddhanta, Srila Prabhupada, and so many of his disciples. So Prabhupada explains that sannyas by which one considers to consider themselves as Narayan or so there's a verse called Dandam Grahana Matrena Naram Narayana Dvita. So Dandam Grahana Matrena, simply by acquiring a stick, Naram Narayan Dvita, that they consider the Nar to be like the Narayan. That kind of sannyas is forbidden. So that kind of sannyas by which they develop this conception of Jangam Narayan, that so there is this conception amongst the impersonalists that the original Narayan is Brahman without form, but they are Narayan with form. So they say Jangam Narayan, that they are Narayan with a form. And that's why they remind each other. Like they will say Namo Narayana. So they will say that, remember you are Narayan. Or they'll say Narayano Asmi, that unto Narayan. So they're again reminding the other person that you are Narayan. So this kind of sannyas is forbidden. And because the people in the age of Kali are more prone to this kind of mentality, sannyas is forbidden. But that sannyas, which is for the service of the Lord, which continues to make the distinction between Jiva and the Lord, which is according to the authorized scriptures, that is not forbidden. And so it's not that the people who have taken sannyas in this age of Kali, they are violating the injunctions given in the scriptures that 5 things should not be done in the age of Kali, but they're using that and applying it in the proper context. Okay, verse 26. Tad abhigaya bhagvana prithu prithu parakramaha Indraya kupito banam ado adatodhyat karmukha. Maharaj Prithu, who was celebrated as very powerful, immediately took up his bow and arrows and prepared to kill Indra himself, because Indra had introduced such irregular sannyas orders. So from this part onwards, we will see that the instructions by Brahma. to Prithu. So we see that Maharaj Prithu is prepared to kill Indra not because he stole the horse, but because Indra had introduced the irregular sannyas order. He is referred to as Bhagavan Prithu. So the Lord, he is always ready to suppress irreligion. Right? It says in Yada Yada Dharmasya Glanir Bhakti Bharata. So whenever there is a decline in religion, he comes. So Prithu Maharaj, as an empowered incarnation, has the same mood. And he's seeing that Indra is introducing activities that will create so much of confusion in future. He takes up his bow and arrow. Then Prithu Parakrama. So Prithu Parakrama is used to indicate that he is completely capable of killing Indra. Just like his son was addressed as Maharathi, Prithu is Parakrama, that he is as if not more powerful to vanquish Indra, which is not a small feat because so many great personalities have come and fought with Indra, and Indra has prevailed. But these personalities, because of Maharaj Prithu, of course, is an incarnation of the Lord, but even his son, they're described as powerful personalities who are capable of fighting with and vanquishing Indra. So here it is said that the kinds of deviant sampradaya that Indra was introducing angered Prithu. He was not so much angered by Indra stopping the yajna as much as the fact that Indra was introducing irreligion in the universe for posterity. Thus, he determined that Indra needs to be killed. So we see that same behavior displayed by Parishad Maharaj. That when he saw that the personification of Kali had entered his kingdom, he wanted to kill Kali. So killing Kali means eliminating him completely. And when he found out that he could not kill Kali, then he asked Kali to leave. So killing Kali was eliminating, leaving is avoiding. And then when Kali, he found out that he could not do that also, then he compromised and then he sequestered Kali. That you're only confined to these places, liquor, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex and use of gold. And then immediately he prohibited these activities. No liquor, no meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex. So initially he said, this is the place where you can live, and he took away that place. And then as far as the gold is concerned, he used that in the service of God because it was only ill-gotten gold. So he used the gold in the service of God. So this is the way that the king can maintain morality, by using the wealth in the service of the Lord. So Prabhupada elaborates that it is the duty of the king not to tolerate the introduction of any irreligious systems. Since Prithu was an incarnation of the personality of Godhead, certainly his duty was to cut down all kinds of religious systems. Following his footsteps, all heads of states should themselves be bona fide representatives of God and should cut down all irreligious systems. Unfortunately, they are cowards and declare a secular state. Such a mentality is a way of compromising the religious and irreligious system. But because of this, citizens are generally becoming uninterested in spiritual advancement. Thus, the situation deteriorates to such an extent that human society becomes hellish. Prabhupada spoke about this very strongly when he was in Bombay. And there he was meeting very prominent personalities. There was a meeting that was scheduled between him and the Prime Minister. He met Indira Gandhi first, but later on Morarji Desai. And this was in 1977. And Prabhupada was very sick. And Prabhupada said, you ask him to come and meet me. And Morarji Desai refused to come and meet him. And Prabhupada was saying, see, this is how the leaders are. They have so much of ego that there is an old person who is a spiritual person. But because they have so much ego, he's saying that if you have to come, I will give you 30 minutes and then you come and meet. But then also Prabhupada was benevolent. He said, I will not go. And he didn't go really because his health did not permit him. But he sent his disciples. And because unfortunately, they reached 25 minutes late. So Muraji Desai gave them only 5 minutes. And after that, he went off. So Prabhupada was initially angry, but then he said that, don't worry about not being able to meet him. Because he said he's not a leader who appreciates the position of spiritual people. He's too much of a materialist. Okay, so I'm going to pause over here and see if you have any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I just wanted to share that, it's surprising in one sense, but also shocking, the way Buddhism and Jainism, which are mainstream religions in India, the way it's spoken of in Bhagavatam. Like I've heard this term sub-religious principles, they don't propound religion, not the dharma and the way dharma is spoken of in our scriptures, but they propound the sub-religious principles of non-violence. That was, but nevertheless, Bhagavatam doesn't mince words when speaking of those things. That was one thing. The second thing, just another comment was that today I was reading with my children, Chaitanya Bhagavat. Lord Nityananda is traveling through different places. And in the pilgrimage, he's going from, in one place, he meets Buddhists. And I think it says that they were wearing red or something like that. I could even... Anyway, so he asked them something and they refused to answer him. And in a way that Lord Nityananda would react, the text said that he hit them with his feet, he hit them on the head or something. Then they sheepishly smiled and then they all dispersed and ran away and things like that. So in a way, the Lord is showing how he views them. So I thought I'll share that. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that more than Buddhism and Jainism, the condemnation of the followers of Sripad Shankaracharya, you would probably get into a lot of trouble if you discuss this outside, because the majority of the spiritualists in the current day and age, they're followers of Shankaracharya. Prabhupada makes the statement that the Hindus are either demigod worshippers or they're followers of Shankaracharya. And they're Pakka followers. They do a lot of recitation of mantras. They know the Vedas much better than us. They know the mantras better than us. So, and here, when you read it, and that's what they want. You get that impression that meeting an impersonalist is like a really, really bad thing, and you'll get into so much trouble if you talk to them. And factually speaking, they have very exalted positions within the Indian society. The other interesting thing is that while there is so much of condemnation, if you see Prabhupada's statements about Christ, he actually glorifies the position of Christ quite a bit. I haven't seen him speak like that about Muhammad, but several places he refers to Christ as a Shakti Veshavtar and says he's an empowered incarnation. I mean, of course, he says that his followers don't follow him. He said, "Thou shalt not kill," and they're killing. But it was interesting that he gives more credence to Christianity than to Buddhism and Jainism. Okay, any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Go ahead.
When Srila Prabhupada brought the first devotees in India, and then when they went to the Kumbh Mela in Ahmedabad, where he was living before, and he told the devotees that they had to be very careful because all these sannyasis that are naked and with ashes and this and that, they can be great personalities as well. That they are from the Himalayas and they come out from the Ganges here. And they're not ordinary people, but we should not, like, in our mind make offenses. Just be neutral, because we never know who they are.
That is true. That's true. Yeah, he would say that some of them are 700 years old.
Mhm.
So they have mystic powers. They may not have devotion, but they definitely have mystic powers.
Yeah.
And Ravi Prabhu, you wanted to share something?
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, first my comment or share is like when you mentioned about Morarji Desai, I was, remembering about one of his interview, like, around a year back, probably I saw, like he looked very cultured and, looks like compared to our present day politicians, he looked a man from a different world. That time I was surprised that he drinks his own, that is there, right, Prabhuji? So I was surprised with that. But now the kind of ego he was having, that is also like a bit surprising.
He lived a very regimented life. He would get up at 1:30 in the morning, do meditation and read, and as you say, he did urinotherapy. And that's why Prabhupada was initially hopeful when Morarji Desai came, because externally he lived sattvic life. Other than that stuff, the drinking stuff, other than that, he lived a sattvic life. But when the interactions happened, then Prabhupada said that not much hope with him. He's just...
Okay. And Prabhuji, Buddhism, it came with the purpose of non-violence. And if we see current day Buddhism, they are the most meat-eating religion, like be it China or Cambodia, we see most meat-eating. So is Buddhism itself, like the philosophy is kind of changed?
It's been changed. I mean, if you talk to the Buddhists in China, they don't accept that it is coming from India. They say that the Buddhists in China actually brought Buddhism to India. Same thing with Japanese. They don't accept the fact it came from India. So they say it went from Japan, it went to China, then it came to India. So it's kind of lost in the whole time. And of course, they've completely changed it. But having said that, even in this day, I have a friend in Vietnam, and he was telling me that there are Buddhist monasteries in Vietnam. They are strict vegetarians.
Oh.
So they follow this thing. If you live in a monastery, you have to be vegetarian. Now, the same people, when they leave the monastery, then they start eating everything. But the rules for living in the monastery is that you have to be a strict vegetarian. Yeah. So you see some glimpses of it, but as you're saying, the whole thing has been completely altered over time and by different personalities over there. They have a name of a different person. I forget the name, who they say was this founder of Buddhism over there.
Okay, religion itself is tarnished.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll end over here. Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hithai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.